Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Tongue-tied and stumbling. This is one description of American foreign policy in the Middle East today. Pick your country: Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Egypt, Syria, Turkey, and even Iran. In each, Washington finds itself either the odd man out, leading alone, or leading from behind in a muddled pack. Is the U.S. simply out of touch, or is history in the region merely moving on? To Crosstalk Washington's stumbling policies in the Middle East, I'm joined by my guest, Kelly Vlahos in Washington. She is a journalist at antiwar.com. We also have Stephen Schlesinger in New York. He is a senior fellow at the Century Foundation and author of the book, Active Creation. All right, Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want. It's only the three of us, so please do jump in. Kelly, if I can go to you first. In Washington, it seems that there's no narrative right now in looking at Washington's and its Western allies, but its approach to what some people would call the greater Middle East, which of course includes Iran. I mean, I'm an avid reader of antiwar.com, and I just don't see any kind of narrative. I used in the introduction of this program the word stumbling, and that's what it appears to be, stumbling. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I would take a different tact. I don't think it's stumbling, but I think what Washington's approach to the Middle East in its foreign policy over the last several years has been, you know, a tale of lost opportunities. When Obama came into office, he was pretty much handed a narrative. He was handed a narrative of the Arab Spring, and as a young, fresh face who had promised much on his campaign in regards to liberation and revolution, particularly with his speech in Cairo, he has pretty much fallen down on the job. He had a chance to, you know, defend, advance the agendas of the revolutionary movements across the Middle East, and he decided basically to succumb to the elites in the Middle East, to the agendas, the competing agendas. In that time, he has pretty much drowned under those agendas and can't seem to find his footing. There is no coherent theme to his foreign policy, whether it be in the Middle East or in the broader global sphere. And I think that has caused some critical damage to the confidence that on both the domestic front and globally in America in terms of what its role is as a dominant power and as a leader. And without that coherent theme, without that coherent strategy, he comes off as a second guesser, a guy who doesn't follow through on his goals. And I think the time is running out for his administration to advance some sort of legacy where his foreign policy is concerned. You know,
Stephen, I have to agree with Kelly here. I mean, I have the map of the Middle East in my head right now, and I was just going from country to country, and I'm thinking, you know, like Libya, Egypt, Israel, Saudi Arabia, of course, Syria is a little bit different. In Iraq, I mean, nobody in those countries particularly cares what the President of the United States says about anything these days. Most of them don't even seem like they want to even answer the phone. I mean, how did this happen? And I don't want to make this into an anti-Obama program, because I did say in the introduction, is this a historical process that's in front of us? It's uncontrollable. It's no one country can deal with this coherently, because it's impossible to deal with in a coherent way. Go ahead, Stephen. I'm trying to get a way out here, not just to say it's Obama's fault, because that's an easy thing to say. Go ahead.
I don't think any American president could get a grip on what is happening totally on the Arab Spring consequences and developments. The fact is that you know, I certainly there are problems that I have with the Obama foreign policy, particularly in the Middle East and elsewhere. But on the broad vision of what he promised in his campaign, his presidential campaign of 2008, he has fulfilled his promises. He has gotten our troops out of Iraq. He was starting to the withdrawal of our troops from Afghanistan. And in his second term, he has now asked his Secretary of State to start talks between Israel and Palestine, which was not something that happened for years, particularly under the Bush administration. and he has tried to
but Stephen, I'm sorry, Stephen, but Obama's been essentially humiliated when it comes to that issue. I mean, time and again, when an American official shows up in Tel Aviv, there's more settlements being built. I mean, it's really quite insulting, and it seems to be intentionally that way. And I even said I was going across all the countries. I mean, the Israelis don't particularly care what Obama has to say about anything. They're just waiting for him to leave.
I think you're being a little unfair. I mean, the point of negotiations is perseverance. You can't expect a settlement the day after it begins. I mean, these talks have been going on for only a few months.
Well, they've been going on since Oslo. They've been going on since Oslo.
Would you prefer continuing the conflict? I mean, give me a break.
Give me a break. Oslo was, what, 1993? Okay, it's been going on. Again, Kelly, if I can go to you. When we look at all of these countries here, the United States
I don't understand your point. You would prefer just continuing what is going on without any negotiation, without any talks.
No, the United States is not a fair broker in this conflict. This conflict is not a fair broker. It's shown itself repeatedly not to be a fair broker. And that's my point here. If we look at the greater Middle East here, you have the United States with very different principles and interests, and they're colliding. Go ahead, Kelly, jump in.
I have to agree with Stephen that, no one president can control the events, the evolving events in the Middle East right now. And I didn't mean to suggest that at all. I think as a journalist and as a consumer of news and current events, I think the problem that I see is that President Obama is not projecting the image of a strong and confident player on the global stage right now. That said, the diplomacy that seems to be coming from Washington, it appears to be just falling short of expectations of the United States as a superior negotiator, as a superior diplomatic player. We see what happened in Egypt. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I mean, after the Arab Spring, after the resignation, the forced resignation of Mubarak and the jailing of Mubarak and the election of Morsi and the Brotherhood Party, there was a space there where the United States could have played a critical role in maybe helping, guiding, just assuring Morsi on a path that would have maybe brought some advancement, some jobs, economic development. I don't know. I am not the diplomat here, but it seemed as though that in that period of time, the United States faltered in its diplomacy. There were so many competing interests, and I think that the Obama administration often falls victim to all of the competing voices on the stage, that he doesn't make a strong path ahead. He doesn't project that strength as a leader that's going to do the right thing. And I think in that space,
well, first of all, I think that
the opportunities were lost.
Okay.
And that's just one piece of it, one piece of where he's falling down.
Okay, they don't like the U.S. coming in and telling them how they should conduct their affairs.
I understand that.
But in any case, on the Morsi thing, they did try to put pressure on him to create a coalition government, bring in the opposition. He refused to do that. There's not much more that the U.S. could have done. As it is right now, we've suspended some of our military aid, but it's had really very little impact on Egypt. I think the more crucial issue is Iran. Now, in Iran, the U.S. is trying to start talks with the Iranian government, and yet it's getting clobbered in the Middle East by the Saudis who don't want us to do it, by the Israelis who don't want us to do it.
Very good friends. Good friends of the United
States. Which refuse. Congress itself that doesn't want us to do it. Here he's trying to do a good thing for the world, for bring peace of immediate nature to the Middle East, and he's getting, killed from all sides. I mean, you can't win in these situations, but you've got to believe in what you want to do, and you want to bring some sort of settlement of both in Syria and in Iran and Israel and Palestine. And if you don't do that, well, all right, forget it. You just withdraw from the whole area and let it go into a conflagration.
Well, it probably will be that way if we stay or if we don't. It's really a no-win situation, I think, at this point. Go ahead, Kelly.
Well, I completely agree with Stephen. I think the point that I was making, and just to launch off of what he said, yes, Obama has to believe what he's doing, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he does believe that negotiations need to go forward. It's just that he is not doing that in an effective way in terms of controlling or at least reaching out to members of Congress so they don't torpedo his efforts on in the Iranian negotiations. And getting back to Israel, maybe he believed the right thing to do was negotiating with Morsi and was helping them on a path, but he didn't do it personally. And it is about image. It is about the show. It is about appearances. He had lower-level diplomats going over there. He had, I believe it was Secretary Hagel was working on the case, but he didn't show a personal interest in what was going on in Israel. And I think it's the show. It is the appearance. It is public relations. It is imagery, and I think that he's fallen down on the job where that is concerned, and that is exactly what's happening in Iran now. He might believe that negotiations are the most important thing as opposed to sanctions, but he's letting all these competing voices drown out his mission.
Okay, we're going to go to a short break here.
He's not showing strength.
Right, going to a short break here, and after a short break, we'll continue our discussion on Washington's foreign policy in the Middle East. Stay with our team. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing Washington's foreign policy in the Middle East. Okay, I'd like to go to Stephen in New York. Stephen, in the first part of the program, we were talking about the lack of a narrative coming out of Washington when it comes to the Middle East. What narrative should it be to be effective? Because it seems very ineffective at this point.
Well, he gave a speech in Egypt in 3 or 4 years, in his first year of his term, in which he talked about the need for democracy in the Middle East. I mean, that was his narrative, and it's a narrative which is traditional to American presidents. It goes back to the founding of our country. So I think the vision is there. I think the question is the tactics. How do you promote democracy in a troubled area, in an area which is going through turbulent transitions? It's a very difficult conundrum, and I don't think that any American president has any weapons at his or her disposal that will magically make everything better. The fact is that we are observers. We're not people participating directly in the process. That's up to the Egyptians, the Syrians, the Iranians, the Saudis. I mean, this is something that they have to deal with in the end. We can simply start talks. We can promote negotiations. We can give economic aid. But in the end, it's their problem to deal with.
Okay, Kelly, I mean, if we can go back to Cairo, it's been mentioned here. I mean, why in the world would the United States speak about democracy when its closest friend in the region is a tyrannical regime called Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia's move into Bahrain? I mean, I think these are horrible things, and the United States has really deplorable allies. And all through the Middle East, they were these horrific dictators. And how can we turn around and say we want democracy when Hamas has an election, they don't like the outcome, forget about Hamas. Hezbollah gets elected, you don't like the outcome, forget them. I mean, I find this truly hypocritical, and I think it damages the United States, and it damages the perception of the United States with people on the ground, because they say these people, these Americans, they just support dictators. Saudi Arabia is the best example.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it is the conundrum of the president. He did inherit this. I mean, unfortunately, he did, cast the first stone, and he said in Cairo that he was going to advance this new vision of democracy, and he was going to support these democracy movements.